Okay, great. So now that this is recording, so we are joined by an excellent panel of experts today. First, we will be hearing from Francois Paquette, who is the Impact Director for the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition, from Max Francone, who is the Head of Global Commercial Origination at Enel Green Power, and finally from Torsten Herbert, the Director of Market Development and Public Affairs at Enel Hydrogen. Now, there will be time at the end for questions. We will save time for question and answer at the end of the presentations, but throughout, please do type any questions you have into the chat box that you should see to the right of your screen. And we will be able to take questions that way, and we hope to address as many as we can. Before we move to our presentations, I will take the time to introduce a resource. We are a European Alliance of Renewable Energy Buyers and Sellers. We were founded in 2017 by Wind Europe, Solar Power Europe, RE100, and WBCSD. We work as an organization to advance corporate renewable energy sourcing in Europe specifically through a combination of policy advocacy, buyer education, and working to connect buyers and sellers through, in particular, our resource event that we will give more information on at the end of the webinar. I will encourage everyone also at the end of today to visit the resource website to look at the Renewable Energy Buyers Toolkit that we provide for free to educate buyers through reports, all of our previous webinars, a European Corporate Sourcing Directory, template PPA contract, and more to help start buyers on their journey to buying renewable energy across Europe. And all of those resources are available for free today. And finally, and thank you for, there is now a link to the Buyer's Toolkit in the chat as well. Finally, to set the scene for the conversation, I wanted to show just one slide here. In Europe, we know that companies are sourcing renewable energy in many ways, but to give a sense of momentum that's been building in Europe, this chart shows the volume of power purchase agreements that have been signed by companies across Europe. We had a record year last year, as you can see, by far a record year, and we are on pace for another record this year. We actually just surpassed 2019's total already for the year. We're at about 3 gigawatts announced for the year. So, and we know that this momentum is going to continue. Now, for companies to fully decarbonize, we know they're adopting multifaceted strategies, not just PPAs, but also on-site installations, and in certain cases, renewable hydrogen. Because as we'll see more here in a moment, for most, renewable electricity and renewables-based electrification will be the fastest path to decarbonizing, but for many, we know that for certain reasons, they cannot become fully electrified. And for that, renewable hydrogen plays a key role. But now that we have seen sort of the overall trends here, I am thrilled to transition over to Francois to give background on the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition and renewable hydrogen.
Thank you very much, Anna. That's a real pleasure to be with you today. I'm also thrilled by the level of attendance today, which also shows really the great interest that the corporate community may have in renewable hydrogen as a solution to decarbonize their businesses. So maybe if we move to the next slide, please. I'll give you a few words of introduction and who we are in a few words. Definitely there is a new hype around hydrogen, and many think that this time this is going to be different. Hydrogen is considered really as a key instrument to guarantee that Europe is climate neutral, that we deliver coupling of different sectors, energy, the real side economy, and create and secure the right and affordable clean energy that we need for decarbonizing Europe. But hydrogen is not only a priority for the climate, it's also becoming an interesting opportunity for EU industrial leadership here. And that's maybe an interesting notion that we can discuss today as well as part of our discussion for securing long-term competitiveness, but also sees new market shares in new markets. And I'm thinking of green products because we see an increasing appetite from consumers for products that are sustainably sourced and manufactured correctly. And renewable hydrogen can definitely help there. But the key question here is hydrogen necessarily clean, and then what is clean hydrogen? So, and I hope to give you an answer today as part of my introduction and presentation. What is clear is that not all hydrogen types are the same, and the view of the discussion here in Brussels discussing around hydrogen was that there was a missing voice in Brussels, and that's why the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition was created, to promote the critical role of renewable hydrogen, not other types of hydrogens, to make sure that its contribution towards the EU long-term decarbonization goals could be taken into account in the best way, as we define a framework, a regulatory framework towards it. And so our coalition was created last year, end of 2020, and we've released recently our policy charter that sets the scene for the core of our action in Brussels. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to the objectives of the coalition, we are clearly here to give a voice to the renewable hydrogen industry in Europe. But it's about also to create a high-level interdisciplinary network of all those companies, innovators, off-takers in the real economy that have an interest in renewable hydrogen. And the point is really to inform policymakers about the benefits of renewable hydrogen and how we scale it up. We mainstream hydrogen in Europe, and we make Europe really the global leader in renewable hydrogen. These are the core objectives of the coalition. Next slide, please. I think it's important to also mention that key players have contributed to make the establishment of the coalition a success. And I should mention here that Wind Europe, Solar Power Europe, and Breakthrough Energy are the three founding partners of the coalition. And that's important to be mentioned. Next slide, please. Just to finish very quickly on the coalition itself and who we are before I set the scene on hydrogen more generally, it's important to look at the coalition as an initiative that covers the entire energy value chain of renewable hydrogen, from the suppliers of energy to the technology manufacturers, but also, and that's important to be stressed, the end users. Now on the screen you see the amount of players that have backed the initiative. We are at the very start of our life. We launched that policy charter I mentioned in March. We are looking at extending the supporters, the number of supporters towards the coalition in the coming months. Next slide, please. Now, when we look at hydrogen today, there is an interesting reality. Hydrogen can come from different sources of energy. I will cover that later. But the reality of the market today in Europe is that 96% of hydrogen consumed in Europe comes from fossil-based hydrogen. only 4% comes from renewable hydrogen. And the idea here, if we look at the ambition of the European Commission, is to swap those numbers and have the majority of hydrogen being coming from renewable energy sources. Now, a key challenge is really the price. When we compare the price of fossil-based hydrogen, we have a price around 1-2 euros per ton of hydrogen today coming from fossil-based sources. When we look at renewable-based hydrogen, the price is from 4 to 6 and even higher sometimes for 1 ton of hydrogen. So obviously this is a very important dimension when a corporate looks into hydrogen as a decarbonization solution. So we need to crack the nut of price as soon as possible so that corporates and users in different sectors can really leverage the full potential of renewable hydrogen. And that's really the core raison d'etre of the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition, which is about tackling the EU policy levers that we have available to bridge the cost gap, as long as, well, first to decrease the cost of hydrogen and make it competitive with fossil-based as soon as possible, and in the meantime, cover the cost gap for end users. Next slide, please. The great news is that latest projections, here is projections from Bloomberg, but there are many other studies showing the same. The latest forecasts show that green hydrogen will be cheaper than blue hydrogen, and I will define what they are in 1 second. And that's a key dimension because well before 2030, green hydrogen will be competitive compared to blue hydrogen coming from natural gas, so fossil-based. And that's very important when we consider investments of, say, 20 years lifespan. Those investments need to take place today. So when we know that sort of trends being confirmed again and again, that's a key dimension to take into account when we want to bet on the right horse. And this is due to a certain number of factors. Stronger focus in mitigating emissions is obviously one. The rising cost of carbon. Yesterday, looking at the EU ETS price, we were at 56 euros per ton. That has tremendously increased in the 4 past years. We were at 5 euros. So that the dynamics here around carbon are completely changing. And then we also have major drivers, the cost of electrolyzers and the cost of electricity. If we just move to the next slide, I'll illustrate that. Here you can see again 2 slides from the study I mentioned from Bloomberg, a very recent study that shows that the cost of electrolyzers is expected to be reduced quite substantially over the next coming decades. I think my colleague from NEL will spend more time on that, but that's a very important element when we tackle the competitiveness of renewable hydrogen. And another point is the cost of renewable electricity, which in forecast is also seen as decreasing over time, more than projected, more than assumed, as you can see on the screen for onshore wind and also solar PV. Those 2 factors are really important. And if we move to the next slide, please. Those 2 factors make renewable hydrogen a very promising solution for decarbonizing our economy. Now, why renewable hydrogen and where is the next question. Why? Because it's carbon-free. It entails no emissions into the atmosphere when we produce it. It allows to really tap into wind and solar potential, which companies can have on site or relying from the grid, provided that we can claim the source of energy of electricity used. It's a key element for the resilience and long-term competitiveness of companies here. And again, we see emerging new markets like green steel, green products, and we see that those new markets have market shares yet to seize, and that will be for those companies investing in solutions like renewable hydrogen to claim that their products are greener than others. And finally, this is about creating sustainable jobs and products. Next slide, please. When we look at renewable hydrogen and the color of hydrogen, the color matters. It's a very important dimension. Today, the most common way of producing hydrogen comes from natural gas with steam methane reformation. This is called gray hydrogen. And if you add carbon capture and storage, you get what we call blue hydrogen. This is completely different from renewable hydrogen, green hydrogen, which is produced from using the technology of electrolyzers or electrolysis, which my colleague from Nel will cover in more details. It's important here to notice that when we produce renewable hydrogen with electrolysis and renewable electricity, there is no CO2 emitted. That's a very important notion. If you look at the figures on the screen, you see that indeed the environmental footprint of the various hydrogen types, at least blue, gray, and green here on the screen, are very different. If we look at natural gas-based hydrogen without CCS, we are around 8 to 12 tons of CO2 per ton of hydrogen produced. It's closer to 20 tons per ton of hydrogen produced if we use coal gasification. And if we look at the life cycle emissions of hydrogen production from renewable-based hydrogen using wind and sun, it's around 1 ton of CO2. Again, in the production phase, there is no emissions of CO2. And that's very important to understand for a company looking at changing the paradigms of emissions for its own business operations, but also, if not or less important for your business operations, also understand that for decreasing the emissions of the value chain. So upstream and downstream. Next slide, please. What are the key markets is also a point that are important today. Today we see the global market for hydrogen by end use really focused on ammonia, refineries, methanol production. It's roughly a market of 70 million tons per year of hydrogen produced and a market of 150 billion US dollars. Quite substantial market, and which is expected to become much bigger with the greater focus we see for hydrogen in the future. The reality of the market today is mainly refineries and ammonia accounting for roughly 80% of the market today. Now, that is all hydrogen types covered. When we look at the prospect for electrolysis here, and potentially renewable hydrogen, the market potential is huge. Estimations, and that can be confirmed by my colleague from Nel as well, are around $20 billion per year of growth potential. So substantial growth potential, an opportunity for the leadership in Europe in those technologies. Next slide, please. So that was for the existing market, but when we look at the potential other markets that are out there, many can be cited. You can see here on the screen, and sorry if it's a bit too small, various sectors that could be considered for hydrogen production. Steel is definitely mentioned. in building construction, for the car industry. You've got cereal-based food production. The chemical sector is definitely mentioned. Shipping, trucks is also part of the sectors often cited that could benefit from using renewable hydrogen. And yeah, there are various questions to consider hydrogen, but when we look at one of the key questions, it's the impact on cost on my products. And here, studies indicate that when we have an end product that is has a certain cost, the share of the hydrogen part, renewable based, is very limited, less than 1%. That's the example of a car that is given in that study, material economics. There are other examples. So here is just to give you an example of the many different sectors that could be potentially using renewable hydrogen in the near future. There is a demand already identified. It's a matter of unlocking that demand and allow those end users and corporates to move to that solution. Next slide, please. So with that, I conclude. This is also the opportunity for me to send an invitation. This Renewable Hydrogen Coalition was set to shape the EU policies that will allow end users, corporates, businesses, heavy industry to find the right conditions, the supporting EU framework in terms of policies to allow them to use renewable hydrogen. So this coalition is open to those who want to join forces and have a say and shape EU policies on renewable hydrogen. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Francois, and appreciate your work with the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition and for that very clear explanation of what renewable hydrogen is and its value. As you were saying, the coalition is Europe focused. I will say if there is anyone interested in the renewable thermal markets outside of Europe, our founding organizations, WBCSD and the Climate Group, they are developing a new initiative working to accelerate that deployment in other markets. So I will recommend a specific contact person in the chat if you would like to learn more about that work. But again, Francois, thank you very much. And already getting some good questions, but we will wait until the end to circle back. In the meantime, just a quick confirmation that yes, this webinar will be recorded. We will be putting it onto the resource website to access after the conclusion of the webinar. So, but next, building on the foundation that Francois just set, would like to turn now to Max to speak in more detail about the work that Enel is doing with renewable hydrogen and speak to some specific use cases you all are deploying now. So Max, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. First, let me thank Resources for inviting me to this panel. Very interesting and very useful, I believe. And let me make congratulations to Francois for the great overview about the green hydrogen market. I would like to spend a couple of minutes to introduce before Enel Group and Enel Green Power. If you can to move on the next slide. All right, Enel is currently one of the largest global utility in the world, with a presence in 35 countries and 5 continents. With a very diversified business portfolio, we act as a distribution system operator, managing currently 2.2 million kilometers of grid. And we are a very integrated player in the market. We sell electricity and gas to over 70 million homes and business, but we don't just sell and distribute energy, we produce it, but keeping sustainability at the center of our strategy. We currently manage 87 gigawatt installed capacity, of which 55% are from renewable sources. We aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, passing through a coal phase out by 2027. We are committed as well in innovation and digitalization, offering very different various solutions for our customer. We are leader, for example, in demand response, managing currently 6.4 gigawatt, and we are an enabler for electric vehicles. We want to build a large infrastructure, both public and private. We get to over 90,000 charging points nowadays. If you can move to the next slide, please. And now, Enel Green Power is one of the largest renewable play operator in the world, with a presence in 32 countries, currently managing 1,200 plants for 49 gigawatt installed capacity among different technology, hydro, wind, solar, and geothermal. We have a very ambitious plan for the next 3 years, 2021, 2023. We want to achieve to install around new 20 giga on new renewable capacity, split between solar and wind, among different geographies, US, Europe, Asia Pacific, and South America. You can move on the next, please. We rely on different technology, wind onshore, solar, storage, hydroelectrical, geothermal energy, and green hydrogen. That is a new business unit that is 1 year now that we launch. Next, please. We have a very ambitious plan for the next decade. We want to add by 2030 additional new renewable capacity for 100 giga. This is a very challenging proposition, but with a commitment to get to the carbon neutrality by 2050. Next, please. And now talking about green hydrogen, as mentioned, we launched our business unit 1 year ago. I would like, before to start to talk about green hydrogen, to make clear our position on green hydrogen. First, we believe that electrification offers the cheapest and simplest way to decarbonize the consumption. It's applicable in many different areas. First, road transportation, building, heating, cooking system, and in many different industrial manufacturing process. Anyway, green hydrogen is for us the perfect complement to decarbonization and electrification, mainly for what we call hard-to-abate sectors. For us, when we talk about all these different colors, green, blue, brown, pink, for us, hydrogen is just green hydrogens. It's the only one that is carbon-free. When we talk about brown, when we talk about gray, when we talk about blue, that are not carbon-free. And when we talk about carbon capture system, they are a very expensive and very complex facilities with an issue about social and environmental acceptance. So we really believe that green hydrogen is an opportunity. Of course, we have to work hard in reducing cost of electrolyzer, increasing their efficiency, reducing the RCO renewable energy to make it competitive in the long way. Can you move to the next slide, please? So that's why we set a very ambitious plan as well for the developing of green hydrogen. So first target is reaching 120 megawatt of electrolyzer by 2023 and over 2,000 by 2030. Next, please. Our main focus is on what we call hard-to-abate sectors. As I mentioned by Francois, is a huge opportunity in terms of business and reduction of CO2. So first, replacing the gray hydrogen used as a feedstock, so ammonia producer, refineries, methanol, or apply that for those processes requiring high-grade heat, like for example, the cements. Next slide, please. In our business model, we envisage this production close by the consumption point. With different configuration, we can couple the electrolyzer close by our renewable project and then deliver the green hydrogen to our customers delivering cylinders or with a short connection to the process of our customers. Or other solution can be build up the green electrolyzer close by the off-taker consumption and feed it through a renewable PPA from a new renewable project in other places. Of course, the mix of the two are also welcome. That is a configuration that most of customers are asking to us. Having the production close by the consumption allows to avoid to create very expensive new pipeline or rely on blending that on methane existing or LNG gas pipeline that has to be repurposed for that. Of course, has many advantages and many complications in managing the blending within the enter of the pipeline. Next slide, please. There are huge changes in the market. I had the privilege and the opportunity to have seen it in the last 5 years. Companies nowadays are facing carbon reduction and sustainability path. And it's not just a hollow marketing activity, it's becoming central for their business strategy. There are many reasons, but I would like to underline 3 that are the most important in my opinion. First, there are new customers who want to buy sustainable products from sustainable companies and make a lot of pressure on those companies to do so. And this key player now moving to an end-to-end evaluation of their emission, including the scope 3, that's mainly basically is the supply chain. So they are putting a lot of pressure on the supply chain to reduce emission, and it probably will be a barrier in the future to keep going to be a supplier for them. And then the third element is the financial institution and investment funds that are lending and investing their money in those companies who pledge to be sustainable and going towards a carbon reduction plans in the next years. So the combination of these 3 reasons now are changing completely the approach of companies toward the carbon reduction, and that's the main driver that push hard-to-abate sectors in using and replacing gray hydrogen with green hydrogen. Next slide, please. Now talking about the target. So as mentioned by Francois, most of the opportunity are in hard-to-abate sectors. So the one using green hydrogen, gray hydrogen as a feedstock, replacing with gray hydrogen. And there are some applications that you can replacing fossil fuel for generate heat with green hydrogens. It's a huge challenge. It's a long way to go, but something is a challenge that is doable. Some of them are closer to be competitive. Some of them are a bit far from that point. But apart from considering the cost of electrolyzer that has to be reduced, the efficiency of the electrolyzer, and the cost to achieve the renewable energy that has to be reduced, another important role will be played by the CO2 price. As mentioned by Francois before, CO2 price is raising up and probably it will keep raising in the future years. And there will be surely a key role in helping the diffusion of green hydrogen in the next decades. Next slide, please. And I will end my presentation talking about our project pipeline. We need more than 1 giga project pipeline to realize electrolyzers around the world, mainly in 4 countries nowadays: Italy, Spain, US, and Chile. But we are actively developing new opportunities in many other countries. This is just to testify the huge commitment of Enel in promoting green hydrogen, and just to underline what is our specific position on this kind of business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your focus on specific sectors you're working with, work with ammonia, steel, refineries, and also for highlighting the importance to corporate supply chains as well. See that as really key here, helping them to decarbonize. Thank you again. Perfect. And so now, very excited to turn it over to Torsten, who works, as we said, for Nel Hydrogen, to speak more from the electrolyzer perspective and the exciting work that you're doing there. So Torsten, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks a lot, Resource. Thanks a lot, Hannah, for inviting me. And thanks a lot, Francois, for establishing the contact. And yeah, I'm happy to close the gap in the value chain now and talk about this electrochemical magic which is happening between the renewable energy source and the hydrogen as an output. What Nel is contributing to what Francois and Max already pointed out, doing its homework on one of the main cost factors, which is the capex, so the investment expenses on the electrolyzer system. And you can, I think, jump 2 slides now. Yeah, so I want to quickly, of course, introduce who is Nel. Part of that section is also what is Nel actually doing to address the capex of electrolysis systems. And then one key part also for us, and we thought, let's say, as a group when we prepared this webinar, that it might also be valuable to talk about partnerships and how important partnerships are on the way to success here. And I have like 3 examples of industrial applications where Nel electrolyzer systems are or will be installed. And yeah, summing it up in the end. Next slide. Yeah, so actually we are again at not only one of the world's largest, but the world's largest electrolyzer manufacturer, with like say nearly 90 years of history and already 3,500 electrolyzer systems installed. We have manufacturing facilities in Norway, Denmark, and the US, and more also install people in offices in key markets like Japan, like Korea, like China. And besides that, and also, let's say, our heritage, which is electrolyzers, and Nel actually is Norsk electrolyzers, so Norwegian electrolyzers. We are also one of the leading manufacturers for hydrogen refueling stations, so actually delivering the hydrogen in the end to the transport sector. Next slide. Yeah, 2 things I want to highlight here. Again, international portfolio, international manufacturing facilities. And also, and that's basically, let's say, one of the unique selling points here for Nel is the experience with, let's say, over 20 years experience in PEM electrolyzers and already 90 years in alkaline. And yeah, having also the hydrogen refueling station facility there in Norway, in Denmark. And also here, if you look at the number, like the 300 hydrogen refueling stations per year, that's more than 3 times the number of stations that have been installed newly in the world last year. So Nel is definitely one of the front runners here when it comes to preparing for the scale up. And this is also one key in delivering decreasing capex for the electrolyzers. And the highlight here is definitely the next step in Herøya in Norway, which you see in the middle here. But I will come to some more detail there in the next slides. The next one. Yeah, so here we are. That's actually our, and it's also, let's say, the working title internally is Game Changer. The Game Changer project in Norway, in this building here, which actually now in the first step, the first line that is currently being installed and is starting operation in the second half of this year. will have a manufacturing capacity of 500 megawatts of electrolyzers, which is roughly 5 times of, let's say, last year's markets for electrolyzers. So again, here Nel as a front runner preparing for the scale up that Francois and also Max described earlier. And the great thing is that this facility here also gives room to expand this to 2 gigawatts. Yeah, we are prepared also with the experience now from installing the first line, depending on how the market develops. And we say like another 500 megawatt would take us between 12 and 18 months to, let's say, get this second or third or fourth line up and running. Yeah, but the first line, really a major step. You will see that in the cost breakdown. I have one at one of the later slides. Is the key step for us, and will bring electrolyzer capex down for this alkaline system already by 50%. Now, next slide. And this is really looking into this capex and what we are projecting here, having, let's say, the gray area for capex in steam methane reforming. Francois mentioned that as one of the key gray hydrogen production devices you need to invest in. And you see, and you also saw on one of the slides from Francois when it came to cost, that already today, depending on where we are geographically and what the power prices are, we can be competitive already today, and even more so with the current ongoing expansion and let's say the production process, which is going live in the second half of this year up here in Norway. And then even more, if we now think the full way filling this facility we just saw up to 2 gigawatts capacity, we will be well at the lower end of this SMR capex range or even below. And even some more details on the next slide, where we see that besides the scaling up and automation in manufacturing, where we here roughly see the 50% cost reduction in this step, you see a few other key parts that bring us further down. And here you see, actually, we foresee a possibility of going down by 75% from today's cost. And these things are really on the engineering side, standardization of the systems. So if we go to large scale systems, really don't go for 22 and 23 megawatts, but start with 20 and then not go for 53 and 57, but rather stay with the 50 and really standardize these key building blocks. And this continues also through procurement processes, but also construction processes, have prefabricated systems commissioned, which also enables lower building and construction costs for the customer in the end. And all this, I say, the capacity expansion, but also the rest of the homework we are addressing here with standardization and prefabricated systems, let us being a leader in electrolyzers, we were also the first, and that's the next slide, we were the first to step out with this target of $1.5 per kilowatt by already 2025. So you can see some of the assumptions here in the smaller letters. So we're talking about $20 per megawatt hour for the electricity input, but the rest is really all in. That's so some of the assumptions are mentioned here. And we are currently, and this is our driver now, and we are with what I presented before, we are passionate and on the way to fulfill that. And one of the parts to get there, and that's, let's say, you can jump 2 slides now, is also establishing partnerships. We are an equipment manufacturer looking at the value chain for hydrogen production and for hydrogen stations. Still, since let's say, yes, Nel is the world's leading electrolyzer manufacturer, but we are still a quite small company, and that really also urges us to build partnerships, establish partnerships. And just recently, basically in the last quarter, we closed some very important steps here. One example on the next slide, we teamed up with 2 partners in the EPC area, which is actually delivering everything out of the scope of Nel. So, which is building, installation, these kinds of things, but also, and that is what's indicated here on the map, increasing the global reach, right? So using the international representation of these large companies to reach out to important regions and jointly offer key ready solutions. The next slide. Looking, let's say, on the off-taker side. So also here we are working, for example, with Haldor Topsoe, where the target is to really deliver integrated solutions, not only power in hydrogen out, but power in green ammonia and green methanol out, really being able to place a bid or an offer for such an integrated system together with Haldor Topsoe, and kind of the same idea, but on the other side of the value chain is the next slide. When it comes to teaming up with one of the largest PV companies, developing integrated solutions on the other side, let's say, of the value chain, really looking into directly linked electrolysis systems to solar power plants, and also going here hand in hand, offering integrated solutions. And then I'll quickly run through the project examples on the 2 or 3 last slides. You can jump 2. Really to show you what is actually happening. So we are in the process of commissioning this 20 megawatt system PEM electrolyzer for green fertilizer project in Spain with Iberdrola and Fertiberia. Also very exciting setup. So this is 2 floors, 2-floor setup of the plant indoor. So also very exciting from, let's say, a plant engineering point of view for us. On the next slide, we have another industry application, or actually the next 2 slides are going into steel. So we were working passionately with our partner Statkraft here in Norway to get this project started. We will install up to 50 megawatts here. And already, let's say, in pilot operation is the next slide. The steel project in Sweden, where we are, let's say, in a small pilot application with 4.5 megawatt. And this serves actually the partners here in the hybrid project also to work towards a large-scale implementation from 2030 onwards. And with that, I would say I'll skip the summary. You can read it through afterwards, or refer to the slides that will be shared. Yeah, and would at least give us the 10 minutes for the questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for not rushing too quickly through the project examples. I thought those were very illustrative, so thanks. And absolutely, if people do have additional questions, please still enter them into the chat box. We do have a good number now, though, so we will get to as many as we can. To start, I might address this first to either Max or Torsten. There was a question about using excess renewable energy from households or industries to fuel an electrolyzer, and the comment was that there is some concerns around that, and wondered if you could speak to the viability of using excess renewables for renewable hydrogen fuel, and if there are issues, what those are, if they might be cost or otherwise.
Yeah, I think, Max, I don't have a lot, but I would give the word to you then, if that's okay. So yeah, it's really about, let's say, the electrolyzer, and that the investment you are doing is also about, let's say, what are the operating hours in the end, and what is the output of hydrogen. So this idea in just catching the excess is depending on the business case and what you set up. And therefore, I think, Max, you are the much better one to address that too, because you have potentially looked into exactly this question. So what is the
Can you repeat the question, because there was an interferences I didn't catch very well. Can you repeat as well?
Yes, so the question was about using excess renewable energy from households or in industry installations to fuel electrolyzers. The question is that a feasible business model? Are there concerns around that business model? If there are, what are they? It's cost issues, operational issues?
So using the excess of energy to feed the electrolyzer, that's the question?
Yes, yes.
Could be a very interesting business model. We are analyzing some activities on that. You know that in many countries we're facing some problem like curtailment or negative price. So in specific country can be an opportunities. Of course, as mentioned by Thorsten, working hours is a key factors in making green hydrogen competitive and sustainable. But definitely is an option to develop. And of course, you have to see the system altogether, renewable project and electrolyzers as one part of the business. And from this point of view, we have a privileged position because we are both a renewable developer and with the aim to selling green hydrogen. So the answer is something that we are analyzing and is dedicated on specific countries, not every countries, because this negative price and as well the ancillaries market has a weight on the manage of that excess of energy.
Interesting. Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Francois, I think the next question should be for you. We've gotten more than one question around policy, and I might sum it up by saying, first, if you could highlight the top conversations happening around policy right now with renewable hydrogen, and then give your view on, what are the top interventions that need to happen right now to really develop and advance the hydrogen market from a policy perspective.
Well, thank you for the question. And indeed, this is really a burning question that everyone has at the moment. What is also exciting is that we are all creating this market. This is a very emerging market, especially for renewable hydrogen. And so we are roughly building everything from scratch. So the coalition here definitely aims to help shape that framework so that corporates and end users can really find the enabling framework that they need for it. In Brussels, what happens and where are the key areas of discussions? The sectors where hydrogen should be used. There is this notion of prioritization. We always have to look at those sectors where using hydrogen will make most sense from the point of view of energy efficiency, basically. Sometimes using electrons, as mentioned by Massimiliano, will be more efficient from the physics of electrons and energy in general. And for some other uses, like heavy industry, for instance, existing hydrogen users, hydrogen renewable based will be a key solution here. And it's important to mention that I like the word game changer because we were facing increasing pressure to decarbonize, and some sectors basically had no alternatives. And hydrogen here is bringing hope to those sectors in order to deeply decarbonize. And that's where probably the focus should be in the coming years, especially as we increase the volumes and the market develops. Then when we have the volumes in place, then can come the question of what other sectors could be using hydrogen. But I think there is sense in that early stage for prioritization. That's one key topic. We often hear about the notion of blending. This is a very hot potato in Brussels. This is also a very important topic. Do we need it or not? We will have to see with the legislators and how stakeholders do feel about it. What is clear is that on the one hand, we need to allow electrolyzers to get to the market as soon as possible and avoid any bottleneck when it comes to storage, because you won't have always demand next to supply. Although we may want to have the models of clusters and hydrogen valleys to increase the synergies potential. Yet, if policymakers decide to go ahead with blending, which can be a good way for storing that hydrogen put on the market, we need to be very clear that here we know that only a certain fraction of hydrogen can go into the gas grids, and we shouldn't be too naive about it. We need to nuance a bit the decarbonization potential of natural gas grids with hydrogen. It's not because you have 10% hydrogen in the gas grid that you have 10% CO2 reductions because of the energy density of hydrogen. So you need to increase your natural gas supply to meet the same demands. So we need to be careful about blending. It needs a lot of considerations. I'm not saying we should be against or for, but that can help the scaling of the market in an early stage, and of course, provided that renewable hydrogen is given priority here. So this is a second topic, maybe additionality, making sure that we ramp up hydrogen production, and at the same time we have the right level of renewable generation capacity installed. We do not basically build enough renewable capacity in Europe. So we need to help member states simplify and speed up the procedure for building up that capacity, which will help produce more renewable hydrogen.
Thank you. Yeah, that was perhaps an unfair question that could be a webinar on its own. So thank you for summing that up so efficiently. I see we are at the hour, but I'm going to ask just one more quick question to Max and Torsten, because we got multiple questions about pairing pairing electrolyzers with offshore wind. Are there examples you can point to now of that happening? If not, do you see it as a near-term future option? Happy to hear from either of you.
The only thing I can say that we are involved in a number of offshore projects and like several levels of development. Yeah, hopefully a Nel electrolyzer will be the first to operate offshore. But yeah, let's see. So, but yeah, it's an interesting opportunity, and as mentioned, we are working with different partners in a number of projects, in also different geographical locations, but mainly Europe.
Perfect. Thanks, Max. Anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, I really have a problem in, you're talking about offshore?
Yes, yes, offshore.
We are not in offshore wind. It's not part of our development. So we believe we have enough room to develop solar and onshore wind. So we are not involved in any offshore project.
Understood. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who sent in these questions. We will follow up with as many of these as we can after the webinar. We will send out a copy of these slides and check that to send perhaps contact information as well for all of the speakers if you'd like to continue the conversation. And finally, we will just round out today with a quick reminder to everyone of the next events that resource is hosting. June 7th is going to be our next resource calling webinar. It's going to be on pricing trends and managing price risk for PPAs in Europe. Following that, if you are a buyer on this call, please go to our website and look into attending our Summer Buyers Bootcamp. This is a free buyers only two-part workshop where you will get to work with your peers to talk about the latest trends in PPAs and corporate sourcing, and then learn more about our template PPA contract we've developed with EFIT. And then finally, of course, we have our resource event that is in the planning stages, and many of you will have already received a save the date for that, but more information to come for that. It will be October 13th through 15th this year. And you can find links to all of these events in the chat box. Thank you, Alice. Finally, thank you again to all of our speakers. Again, wonderful presentations. Thank you for giving us the latest information on hydrogen. We know it will be very useful to everyone here. So thank you all, and have a wonderful afternoon.